Hello and welcome to Strong Talk today with Zana Morris and Strong Nutrients. So we asked last week if our followers could send in some questions and we would answer them live with Zana today. So I'm pleased to say we've had quite a few questions come in, a real sort of mixed bag, but we're going to get Zana on so that we can answer those questions. Just waiting for it to kick in. There we go. Oh, hi.
Here's to hoping I can.
Yeah, there was a long delay this time, which is not good. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much as I sort out my camera.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Very good.
What's gone on today? There we go. There we go. Right. So last week we asked for some of our followers to send in questions. So we've had a few DMs come in, lots of similar topics. So we've got some things coming up such as carbohydrates, amino slim. But one question that sort of kept coming up was a bit about immunity. And obviously, I wanted to just ask about Cellution because that's something that I take. But what's the difference between taking Cellution or taking just your regular vitamin C and your zinc that you would take to build up your immune system?
Yeah, I'm going to say that even comes up with myself when dealing with clients, because even I have to decide on occasion which direction would I go in.
Yeah.
So that's a very valid question. So for me, if you've got the sense that you have a cold or a bug or something coming on, you know the way you can kind of feel it in the first day or two, and you're not quite sure if it is or if it's going to land or it is or isn't, that's when I would go straight for just vitamin C and zinc.
Right.
So I get a high dose of vitamin C. There's so many forms out there. There's some great forms. I try and get an alkaline one. I like the liposomal ones, but any good old-fashioned vitamin C would work. And I would get in about anything from 3 to 8 grams a day, which is quite a lot. Now, at that point, where I'd spread it out. And I'd get the zinc in as well, always with food, and roughly maybe anything from 20 up to 50 milligrams, no more than about 75 milligrams over the course of a day, always with food. So you'd spread that one out with the meals. And I find that in almost every case just seems to knock it on the head.
Okay.
Now, if I was talking though, generally, in order to build up my immunity after a cold or flu or coming towards the end of it, you just want to build yourself back up or to prevent it. So, and to be honest, even the solution will work if you feel it coming on, but I just find the hard hit with vitamin C seems to just wrap it. But to prevent it, to get your immunity back up, to help with preventing this time of year, the allergy sort of season kicking in, the solution then comes in on its own. And it's just because it has the vitamin C, it has the zinc, but it has something called NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which helps protect the bronchioles, they say, the kind of the lungs, all those breathing tubes. It has things like turmeric, which helps reduce the inflammation, and anything anti-inflammatory is always helpful to help prevent the bugs and the colds and the flus. It has things like carotenoids, which protect the mucous membranes, which means the throat, the lining of the lungs, the eyes, which is why it's so good against the seasonal allergies.
Right.
So it's got quite a range in there. I mean, it's got a load of other things. It's got the selenium, it's got the vitamin E, it's got a load of other things that protect immunity generally, the green tea extract. It's good for other things. But in terms of which to take, the vitamin C and zinc on its own and just hit it hard, or Solution, if you're getting it, as in if you can feel it coming down, I would just grab the vitamin C and zinc. But if it's to prevent and to build up after, or coming into the allergy season, I would go Solution.
Okay. And just out of interest, is it Solution is you regularly take it and does it store in your body?
Yes.
Or is it, because I know I was taking it and I can remember being quite smug when we had a chat once that my kids had been catching everything at school and there was me not.
Yeah.
And then I think I got a bit like I stopped taking it and then I got ill. So it's something that you need to regularly
taking. Well, yes and no. So vitamin C, for the most part, is water soluble. So there'll be certain nutrients in it that are water soluble, which means they don't store. So they'll build up your immunity. Your body will use them to build up your immunity. And if you don't take it for one day, you're not going to suddenly get a hit or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there's a certain point where if you stop, but after a while, after a few weeks, your immunity could drop back down again. Depends a little bit on your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, if stress will eat into things, if you're losing sleep, that'll eat into things. If you're overworked, that'll eat into things.
Yeah.
So if you've got a very calm lifestyle, then you might find you don't need it in the same way. But yes, some of the elements in it store, like the vitamin E, which is fat soluble, store, the carotenoids will store, but there's the more water soluble ones that won't.
Right.
But that does not mean if you take it today and don't take it tomorrow you could pick up something. That's nonsense. It just means over time you may not.
Sure.
So yes, I would normally go for about 3 or 4 of those a day and take it consistently. And I tend to do it where I take it consistently for, well, I'm going to say a few months is the way I do it now. And then I may not take it for a few months. Now, you don't have to do that. If you're somebody that's working hard all the time, or you really feel you're up against it, just even like almost your whole body feels like there's a lot of wear and tear going on, if you like. And if you do a huge amount of sports, it's worth it too, because that oxidizes the body, which means you end up with extra free radical damage, and that can age the body. And all of Cellution is an antioxidant. It prevents the oxidization, so it protects the cells from that wear and tear.
Right. That is good to know. Good to know. That's always a question that comes up. So moving on, carbs, carbohydrates.
Yes.
So I shared a video on your page earlier in the week about sort of what to eat for breakfast and things like that. And we always get, whenever we talk about nutrition, we always get the feeling that carbs are like the devil. So I want to know, and it's something I actually grew up with. It was something that, you know, my mum, my nan, it was all the carb, you know, you had to cut the carbs, you had to cut the carbs. So are they really that bad for you? Or are they actually okay in moderation?
It's a great question, because most of my clients come to me, now not all, just to be very clear, but definitely the majority come looking to lose belly fat primarily. They'll call it losing weight, but if we really broke it all down, actually it's the belly fat they want off. The rest doesn't bother them too much. So most of my life works around doing exactly what your mother and nan suggested, which is let's reduce the carbs. So let's break it down very briefly. Now, anyone listening probably knows all of this, but let's just break this down super fast. You've got 3 macronutrients. You've got your protein, which I love talking about, which most people don't take enough of. You've got your carbohydrates, and you've got your fats. And obviously fats is another thing I love talking about, because again, I think we often don't take enough of. Carbohydrates absolutely have their place. Carbohydrates break down into sugars. The body can use those sugars for, well, above all for fuel, quite frankly. But if you have too many sugars running around the bloodstream, the body releases insulin to get the sugar out. And then normally it can go into glycogen stores, which is useful, which is energy stores. But ultimately, if there's too much or just too much, it'll end up as fat around the middle, which is the belly primarily. But I think that includes really back fat and all of that sort of trunk, if you like. So it doesn't necessarily, it can do, but it doesn't necessarily go on as fat around the hips, and that can do. But quite frankly, fat around the hips is not a health issue, just to be clear. So that doesn't matter at all. It's the fat around the middle that we're concerned with from a health perspective. And carbohydrates are going to influence that the most. So when you reduce them, there's no question you tend to lose your insulin levels steady, they become more stable, and you tend to lose belly fat. If you look up the general recommendation of what we should be having in terms of carbohydrates, the general recommendation is over half of what we eat should be carbohydrates. Now, to be clear, what are carbohydrates? Because this is a really good question.
I was going to say, yes. So I never think of vegetables as carbohydrates.
Exactly.
I always just think bread, croissants, all of those sorts
and
of
that's
things.
what everybody's thinking. Exactly that. Fruit, vegetables. So your lettuce leaf is actually a carbohydrate. It's just not going to break down into a huge amount of sugars as such. There's not a lot in it. So you've got all your vegetables, your fruit, the obvious ones, the breads, the grains, the pasta, the rice, the potatoes. You've got those starchy carbs like the potatoes, sweet potatoes, would go in there. So all of those are your carbs, and then the obvious, which is just sugar, sweets. I often find the issue with alcohol is less the alcohol with clients and more the sugar within the alcoholic drink. So when you're drinking wine, you're having grape juice, which is a carbohydrate. So they're all your carbs. So they're the big class of foods that, if you track it through historically, tend to end up on the plate to fill out the plate. You know, if your potatoes, or if you're in Italy, you'd have had the pasta, or the bread. They're kind of the ones that sort of fill you up. And in certain cultures, you'd have the carbs and then you'd have the protein after, because the protein would have been the expensive stuff. So you kind of wanted the belly slightly full before everyone went for it. So they're kind of the ones that just fill out the plate as such. They do have their place. I mean, most good carbohydrates, like your grains, your rye bread, good source of B vitamins. It's helpful for the thyroid to function properly. It's a good source of energy. The little increase in insulin that you get from carbohydrates can help the body utilize its protein properly. So the protein food that you eat, if you have carbohydrates with it, the body will be able to use that protein better. So all of those are really, it's useful. And in fact, from a health point of view, very useful. Where I would say avoid them is where you have a definite ring of belly fat that you're trying to reduce, because then they just don't help. But if you don't have that ring of belly fat, if you've virtually nothing to lose around the belly, then I don't see any reason whatsoever why you couldn't be taking them. And I think you'll get good benefit with them, particularly if you don't just munch them on their own, but have them in line with your protein. So yogurt would be the protein, fruit would be the carbs you could add to it. You could have, you know, the idea of cheese and grapes kind of thing. The grapes are the carbs, the cheese is the protein.
Perfect.
Exactly. Your beans on toast, that would work. So those kind of things, your potatoes with your meat. So if you don't have belly fat to lose, it can be very good for energy. And a last thing I'll say, and particularly if you keep your fat intake, if you're keeping your fat intake on the lower side. Two things that what doesn't mix well on that is high carbohydrate and a high fat intake. I don't think mixes superbly well. I think you've got to kind of choose. So if you're someone on a lovely high keto plan where you're on high fat and protein, keep the carbs lower. If you're somebody who isn't enamored with fat, then getting the carb in with the protein can work well.
Interesting.
I hope I haven't confused there. That's it.
No. It's good to know with the protein. That for me, that support, because I do like a carbohydrate. So that kind of supports that. So long as it's not just, on its own, I'm having it with the protein, then that's going to be beneficial. But what about sort of in terms of slumps you can have after carbohydrates, stress, and how all of that sort of thing?
Right. So the slumps, great question. If you're getting a slump after carbohydrates, then you shouldn't have had the carbohydrate. That's your insulin surging and the sugar getting pulled out, and now you're asleep. So that's a sure sign that either you needed less of it or you should have had more protein. Or indeed, you could have a bit of fat with it. Now, I'm not saying occasionally having fat and carbs together is a bad thing. It's just doing a lot of it a lot of the time would be a very fast way to put on weight very quickly. So if you're having slumps, it's too much carbohydrate or not enough of protein or fat the other side of it. So in essence, the carbohydrate's breaking down fast, the sugar's shooting into the bloodstream, your body's releasing all this insulin in reaction to that, and now in 5 minutes you're going to want to just go to sleep. I never think that's a good sign. You should never feel like falling asleep after a meal. It's too much insulin. The other part of that question, which was stress. That's a great one. Right. Very quickly, this is the quick run through on stress. And anyone who's heard me will have heard me say this before. When we're under stress, we're releasing cortisol and adrenaline and the stress hormones. And one of the jobs of cortisol, of course, is to help attack glycogen and muscle stores in order to get the sugars out of them into the bloodstream, to use the sugars for energy so that you can fight or you can run. That's the purpose of it. The sugars are great. When you want a fast burst of energy, we all know this. If you're going to want to fight or run, it will fuel you to keep you going. The trouble is, if you don't fight or run, your body will release insulin to get the sugar out of the bloodstream. The sugars get shuttled away. The next hormone that gets released after that is one called ghrelin. And now that will make you crave.
Right.
And now you're going to crave more carbohydrates. And the blood sugars are going to go up again. The body's going to release more insulin.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so your cycle goes.
Yeah.
So my recommendation very strongly is, if you're under a lot of stress, go protein.
Right.
Because if you think about that cycle there, the cortisol can cause the breakdown of your muscle stores, your lean body mass stores. So now you need protein to replenish
Mhm.
those. But also the protein will make you fuller without causing the same insulin release. So you're less likely to feel as much like craving. Now, you don't have to avoid the carbohydrates,
Yeah.
but just drop them and get the protein in there, be that in the forms of protein shakes or fish or meat or whatever form you like.
Yeah.
That and that helps. Just
Okay.
steady the ship.
Okay. And you sort of touched upon the high fat with high carbs isn't ideal, but high fat and carbs, um, if you're looking for weight gain, that's a positive thing to do, right?
Potentially, yes, potentially. What I would say is, so when I was doing that high fat diet, so sort of the book on it, and looking at all that, and I work with clients all the time on high fat diets.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to lose fat and you're going the high fat approach, now there's more than one approach, but if you're going that approach, then oh my gosh, you want to eliminate the carbs completely. If you get them in there, you're in danger of actually increasing weight, never mind not getting results.
Mm-hmm.
The combination can be super fast. Now, if you do it too much, the only thing I'd be cautious of and I would watch is just keeping an eye on your cholesterol levels, quite frankly, because sometimes they can increase too with that combination. But it's worth just watching it. It's not necessarily the case. But yes, I've had clients where we're looking to build up. So
Mm-hmm.
they're underweight, and they're just looking to actually build. And I don't just mean that they want to gain fat around the belly. Clearly, nobody wants to do that, but they just weight up. It was too low. I find if you do a version of a plan like that with the high fat and add in the carbohydrates, then you can build very fast. So
Right.
it's definitely helpful,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you keep the proteins in there now, assuming you're going to keep the protein so it's more balanced. It's definitely helpful if you want to build weight. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that does not mean if you have a meal with your potatoes, your fish or meat or whatever form of protein and put nice olive oil over the top of it with vegetables that you're going to suddenly gain weight. It does not mean that.
Mm-hmm.
It just means if you really did need to build up, it's a good way to add in the extra fats and add in the extra carbohydrates to the mix, sort of increase those, and that will help. And there are people who do need to and are looking to gain weight. So I wouldn't be dismissive of that
No,
at all.
no. Okay. And something to do with thyroid and
Yep,
carbohydrates?
carbohydrates. Yes, yes, yes. We mentioned that. Yes, well done. Yes, we were having a chat yesterday, and I briefly spun through the benefits.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that at the beginning, which is carbohydrates are beneficial to the thyroid functioning.
Okay.
So being completely void of them is not necessarily the best in the long term. Now, some people will respond super well to staying clear of carbohydrates all the time. But for most, I think even intermittent carbohydrates, like even if you only get them in, if you're someone who likes the low carbohydrate approach, I tend to, but it doesn't mean I do it all the time, but I tend to. Then just deliberately bringing in the carbohydrates maybe a couple of times a week can be useful from a health point of view.
Okay. Okay. And if you do crave, what's the best thing, sort of what's the answer to help settle down those cravings? Just upping the protein.
Up the protein.
Okay.
Just, I mean, you could say up the protein and the fats, but just a simple way of doing it is just increase the protein. Fill
Okay.
yourself up with protein.
Okay.
It's very, you won't crave in the same way, and it'll sustain you for so much longer.
Yeah.
Just so I find the easiest way to get clients off the sort of carb addiction, if you like, is just pile in the protein, because
Yeah.
it's not going to make that much a difference over a short space to your weight as such. You might think, oh no, I just need to cut back.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes you're better off increasing to
Yeah.
decrease.
Yeah.
I just think it's
Yeah.
faster and less stressful.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And low glycemic
Yeah.
carbs.
So low glycemic means low glycemic. The words low glycemic really just means low insulin producing, if you like, as in that's what it actually refers to, if you
Okay.
like. So you can have low glycemic proteins as well.
Hmm.
So foods that don't cause a big insulin response.
Right.
So you're looking at your rye breads, your pure grains. So a whole wheat pasta or a brown rice, things that take time to cook. So
you mentioned this yesterday, and I was a little bit shocked. I hadn't heard that
yeah,
before. But yeah, so you're saying like the 2-minute microwave rice.
yeah, 2 or 5 minute
No.
rice, no. 2 or 5 minute porridge, no.
Right.
You want to cook them for a bit longer. If they cook that fast, they're processed, quite frankly, and most processed foods are quite high glycemic.
Okay. Okay. So the better ones would be the slower cooking, the whole wheat,
Yeah.
the porridge made from scratch
Well,
type thing.
when I was a child, now I would be lying if I said I personally have ever done this. I have not remembered. But when I was young, the porridge oats, they went into spinach oats. They went into the pot of water at night and sat there overnight before they got cooked the next day. And it still took nearly an hour to cook them.
Yeah.
So I don't do that. Just to be
No.
very clear.
No. No. Okay. Um, I think we've covered all of the questions that came in on carbs. There's nothing else that you want to add in?
No, I think the general rule of thumb with them is I'm not a big believer in the generic approach of you need about approximately half. It's anything from kind of 40 to 60%, somewhere between 200 to 300 grams if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet. That's the generic view. I'm not a big believer in that for the simple reason that I think your background plays a role, as in your heritage or your
Mhm.
genetics. I think some people thrive on low carb plans and other people, quite frankly, don't.
Right.
I think your body type, your body shape makes a big, big difference.
Mhm.
Your hormonal balance. So when we hit our mid 40s and the whole hormonal balance kind of shifted due to the perimenopause and menopause, that it will impact how many you should be
Mm.
having. So as estrogen levels drop, insulin levels can start increasing. Then you want to reduce your carbs at that stage in life. You may not have needed to reduce them 10 years earlier.
Mm.
So I think it's really to take stock of where you're at, what
Yeah.
you feel you need to achieve. If you're in great shape and on a very low carb diet and you train well, but you find your energy's not as good, then you may be needing to increase them.
Right.
So I think it's just take stock of how you feel, what your body shape is a really good way of looking at it. What is your body shape doing? If you don't have really any belly fat, then chances are you could get away with some,
Mhm.
particularly a bit low.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more common sense and reading where you are in
Yeah.
life, well, what your body right now might need.
Yeah. Listening to yourself.
Mm.
Um, right. Well, we've had a couple of questions come in on the topic of amino slim, I can see. So we will move on to that because probably the majority of questions I get are based around amino slim. Give me the lowdown on it. Give me
So
talk
then,
to me.
right, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you. So, amino slim, it's a single amino acid. It's part of a protein. You get it in your fish, your meat, your eggs, anyway.
Mhm.
It's in vegan foods, it's in vegetarian foods and proteins. You get it. A lot of your foods will have it.
Mhm.
When you take it on its own, away from other foods, being the emphasis, before bed or before particularly high intensity training, it seems to encourage a natural hormonal process that occurs. So when we sleep, what should happen, I'm not saying it always does, what should happen is we have a natural release of a hormone called growth hormone and growth hormone kind of style hormones that push the protein back into the body, quite frankly, if you like. So in other words, it's the repair one.
Yeah.
When people say we repair when we sleep,
Yeah.
that's why.
Okay.
And it also seems to reduce insulin levels.
Mhm.
Now, anything that keeps the insulin levels down or helps reduce it will help you get rid of belly fat, quite
Yeah.
frankly, simply
Yeah.
put.
Okay.
So that is a process that should happen when we sleep anyway. It's a process that happens in abundance while we're in our teens and early 20s and seems to reduce naturally as we age. Um, High insulin producing foods, so high glycemic foods, will reduce the body's natural capacity to do this. So, in other words, if you have a glass of wine before bed or a hot chocolate, whatever the case may be, before bed, then the chances are you won't get that same hormonal balance. You won't have that same growth hormone hit, so you won't have the same reduction in insulin, so you won't get all that benefit.
Okay.
High intensity training, similar thing happens. You go for a sprint, your body naturally releases growth hormone that suppresses the insulin, so the same process is occurring. So this
Okay.
is happening anyway.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter about immunosuppressant. Ignore that for the moment. This is what's happening, provided you haven't had, big, as I said, a glass of wine before you go to bed.
Hmm.
Your body. So the L-ornithine seems to encourage that process along. So you firm up a bit faster, you lose the fat faster.
Hmm.
Now, the emphasis being on the two things really, because we talk about it all the time for fat loss, but it does support the muscle recovery.
Right.
In English, what that will mean is it will usually be inch loss before weight loss.
Right. Okay.
So it's definitely worth monitoring the weight, but I would get out a good old fashioned measuring tape and I would measure the tummy, the belly, that, and watch that. For best results with it, there are three, I'm thinking, is it three things? That's three things, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. As in, I remember exactly what to do, but if I'm counting correctly, there's three things we need to watch for. The first is the one that most people will know. You must fast for 2.5 hours before taking it. So if you go to bed at midnight, you have to stop eating at 9:30.
Yeah.
You can drink herbal tea or something, but nothing with food value. And then within that, you need to watch for any medications or supplements that could have food value.
Mm-hmm.
For example, magnesium won't. It's just a micronutrient, it's a mineral, no problem.
Yeah.
But should you have, now our magnesium just doesn't do this, and I don't know many that do, to be clear, but should you have magnesium in a coated tablet that you could take sweet when you had it,
Yeah.
now that sweetness would be a sugar and that would interfere with it.
Even that small amount, that
It
would.
could do.
Okay.
It could do.
Okay.
So most medications, I've just seen a question, progesterone. No, progesterone tends to be absolutely fine with it, provided, and I haven't come across this to be clear, provided it's not in a tablet form that has a sweet coating. But I haven't come across that being a case at any point in time, to be clear.
Yeah.
So things you couldn't take with it. You couldn't take creatine. It's another protein type supplement. That wouldn't work. You couldn't take collagen. That's another protein type one. That wouldn't work. But you could take magnesium. You could take progesterone. You could take the chill pill, for example.
Okay.
So the fasting is the first point. Really important.
Also, just to say, it doesn't break your fast, does
No,
it?
it doesn't.
Okay. Because I get that a lot
Yeah.
as well. Does it? Will it break it?
In the same way, collagen shouldn't, neither should creatine, because they're not complete proteins. They're not a macronutrient as such. So the first thing is the fasting. The second thing is, it does, in my experience, work at its absolute best if you take it before bed consistently.
Okay.
So I find some people might take it if they wake up in the night, or others might take it in the morning, or others take it before they train. Now, the best results I've always found with it is consistently before bed. So in other words, not for 3 or 4 nights and stopping for a couple and then for another 3 or 4, but just take it. You're better off almost taking it consistently for 3 to 6 weeks and then stopping than 3 to 6 months on, off, if that makes sense.
Oh. Okay.
So that will be the second thing. And that leads me to the third thing, which is for best results. The consistency there being important. So if you did have a night where you ate or drank later, you're out, then rather than skipping it all together, then you could take it in the middle of the night or first thing the next morning and have a late breakfast.
Okay.
So that's for perfection. So take it before you go to bed, fast it 2.5 hours beforehand.
Yeah.
Take it every night. And on the nights you miss it, take it later in the night or first thing in the morning, if for whatever reason you can't. But make that the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Okay. And if you wanted to take it just every morning, if evenings don't work for you?
If evenings don't work for you, then if you're going to take it in the morning, you really must, to get proper results out of it, you must do some training afterwards. So you're getting that sprint effect, if that makes sense. So you could take it on rising. About 20 minutes later, you could do, like, I'm throwing this out. Somebody may laugh at me saying this. You could do 60 to 100 squats. You could do a whole load of press ups. You could go for a run, but if you're going for a run, do it as sprints. So get it high intensity, not just movement. And you take it 20 minutes later, you do that exercise, and then don't eat for about 2 hours after that.
Okay.
And that would also work. That would also work.
Okay. And is there any?
Slim. I'm glancing at these questions this time around. What are we mentioning? We're talking about Amina Slim here.
And is there any difference between the powder or the tablet form?
I'm going to say yes. I don't know if I should say yes, but I'm going to say yes. Very simply and very cheekily, the powder you get more into you and it works faster. And it's cheaper, quite frankly, in terms of the amount you get. But parking that one, in terms of capsules work. I mean, the capsules do work. So honestly, we've got the capsules, and honestly, I'm someone that I can go through phases of having no issue taking powders, and then I just get to the point of, oh, I just can't be bothered. And
Yeah.
that's just the honest truth. So the
Yeah.
capsules are easier.
Yes.
And often it's the one you're going to take. So
Yeah.
if you're on capsules, you know, and you know you're going to take them, then stick to the capsules. If you're the type that'll get a powder and look at it and go, oh, I'll do it tomorrow
Yeah.
night, then don't bother with the powder.
Yeah.
But the advantage of the powder is, most will take up to a teaspoon of it. Now that's the equivalent of 10 capsules. So that's going to work faster.
Okay. Yeah, because it's 5 of the capsules, isn't it?
But now,
Yeah.
can you take 10 capsules? We even just say 4 of the capsules will be enough. You
Yeah.
can definitely double up on it. Now that's not a problem.
But it's whether
But
you're happy to take that many
Ex-
at one time.
exactly that.
Right.
Now, I'm not recommending what I'm saying next, but just to be clear, from years of working in gyms and around clients and around people generally, not just clients who might have been training for contests where they were trying to reduce the fat levels, they'd be taking about 2.5 teaspoons a night to get
Right.
the fat levels
Okay.
down. So that's the equivalent in capsule format of about 25.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the
Wow.
point of it being, you can take quite high doses and it will work. The only thing, and I'm emphasizing this, if anyone's thinking of taking higher amounts, I would probably recommend you don't. You might find you get queasy with it or get stomach cramps. Now,
Okay. If you're taking too
if you're taking
much.
too much. And
Mhm.
if you ever find you get that with the Amino Slim, even on the lower amounts, just lower the amount again. Do that for a few nights or a few days, however you're taking it, and then increase it back up
Yeah.
again. And that will tend to resolve
Okay.
it. Most will have no issue with a teaspoon, but some people might find it's a bit much, in which
Yeah.
case have it
Yeah.
and then see how you go. And then if you feel the need to build it up, do.
Okay. And does it taste of anything, the powder?
Yeah, I think it's got a weird aftertaste.
Okay.
I've had some people that say it tastes of nothing whatsoever, and I've had other people say it tastes absolutely awful. And I think it's like Marmite. I think different people seem to taste it differently.
Yeah.
My recommendation, if you're going powder, put it in a small amount of water. It kind of dissolves. It's not like the creatine, which is quite.
Yeah.
It stays grainy, if you like. It doesn't do that. It kind of pretty much dissolves. But
Okay.
I would only put it in a small shot glass of water. I'd down it, and then it'd have a little hit of water after it,
Okay.
and that just eliminates the taste.
Okay. So it's not like a big glass that you're having to drink back. It's just a small amount.
I would do it in
Okay.
a small shot glass, get it back, and then have a gulp of water after, and then I find you don't notice anything.
Yeah.
But as I said, I won't deny the powder now, the capsules, no problem. But the powder, it seems to vary from one individual to the next. I'm one of the middle of the road ones. But I had a customer once contact me going, is there something wrong with me? I don't taste anything with the
Don't complain.
that was
It's
my response. Don't complain. Excellent.
And you've mentioned before as well that it can help you with sleep when you take it in the evening.
Yes, this is an interesting one. We put it in that Sleep Plus stack.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't put it in the original Sleep stack was not everybody will get that benefit, but a
Okay.
large percentage do.
Hmm.
And it doesn't so much prolong the sleep, but it can help people have a deeper sleep.
Right.
Now, my understanding is because it helps that support that hormonal balance. So if you
Mhm.
think about it, the exact opposite to doing Amino Slim going to bed would be having a glass of wine or a sugary drink going to bed,
Yeah.
where or having something sugary. In other words, the carbohydrates are too high, and you know the way you kind of have a sleep that you kind of wake up, and then
Yes.
it's that high levels, then it dips, and it causes you that wakefulness throughout the night.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I think, and this is just me really saying this, that Amino Slim does the exact opposite. It supports, because that sugary input before bed, it stops the body releasing the growth hormone. It causes the insulin to be too high. So the hormonal balance is a bit skewed then. It's upside down.
Right.
Whereas our natural balance would be the growth hormone would be high, the insulin would drop. And the Amino Slim gets in behind that. So it kind of helps the growth hormone go up a bit more and the insulin go down a bit more. So I think that's one of the reasons it helps with the sleep.
Okay. Okay.
But it does have an interesting impact. The research shows it has an interesting impact.
Mhm.
And as we both know, one of the ladies who works with it swears by it
Yeah.
for sleep. That's the only reason
definitely.
I'm taking it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's in the Sleep Plus stack, isn't
yeah.
it? So that will go alongside the magnesium
Uh,
and
the
the
chill pill. The chill
chill pill.
pill. Yeah.
Okay. And is it the powder or the capsules we've got in that? I can't
I
remember. I
think
think it's powder.
I think it's the powder.
Yeah.
I think it's the powder we put in the sleep stack. I
Okay.
believe it is. I believe.
I'll
Yeah.
share it.
So anyone who is, yeah, and actually that's a good point because some people might.
Oh, we've lost you. I've lost you for a minute there.
I'm here. I'm here.
There we go.
I'm back. Sorry, a little notification came. Apologies. Some people may not realize we have it in the sleep stack, and there will be some of you taking the magnesium and the chill pill already. So
Mhm.
if you get them, three of them in the sleep stack together, it's in Sleep Stack Plus. There's a discount on it,
There
so
is.
that's
Yeah.
worth considering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll share that after this as well. But I think that covers everything from Amino Slim. I'm just going to quickly check whether there was any other questions. Very nice praise from Sarah saying your high fat diet book and Amino Slim changed her life. Thank you. So very pleased to hear that. I think we have covered everything. If anyone's got any additional questions, obviously just drop me a line. We want next week to talk about immunity because it's coming up quite a lot, but immunity and
Yeah.
energy, and how some sort of hacks and some tips on how to help ourselves at this time of year as we sort of switch over seasons. So
Yes.
again, if anyone would like to send any questions through to us, then please do. And I'll be saving this down so people can listen back and I will share the stacks. Thank you,
Brilliant.
Zana. Really
Thank
nice to talk to you, and I will speak to you later.
you. Will indeed. Take care. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.